World Heritage. Last time, we brought you to Cining Hall, Cining Palace, and the gardening area of Cining Palace. This time, we will take you to the other 3 palaces and the royal garden. Speaking of Longzong Gate, it's a major passage. Now, we're walking on the passage that the previous officials must have to pass through when they try to meet with the emperor. Now we are in the plaza of the Palace of Celestial Purity. It's called Tianjie. In the south of Tianjie, that's the area for different ceremonies, and on the north side, that's for daily lives. Speaking of the Celestial Purity Gate, there are several passages connected with it. In the middle, it's the Celestial Purity Gate is the main gate, and it's at the same direction with Longzong Gate. And another gate was also for the feudal China's officials to meet the emperor. For those lower houses, they look small, but they're the famous Junji area. It was established by Emperor Yongzheng in order to help the emperor handle military affairs. It looks normal from the outside, and if we walk inside, this area also was very simple, equipped with very simple stationaries like the pens, and that's actually not represented by the importance of this council called Privy Council, because it's very significant as to guarantee the secrecy of those military information and to improve efficiency of those officials. For the council members, what they have acquired as key information will be reported to the emperor, and then those information will be implemented in practices very quickly. And those council members were very busy. They have to come here at the start of each day, and also every day there will be food prepared for those council members so that they could always stay awake and energetic. Those food will be provided 24/7, and every 5 days there will be some desserts and fruits. In summertime, there will be the cool melons, and in some special festivals, there will be mooncakes or porridges, all as bonuses from the emperors. So the council members have a lot of choices to eat. And those food are commonplace to us today. Another thing worth mentioning was that those council members have their other posts and their own ranks. So as a council member, it's like a part-time job with no additional ranking or revenues. But still, as a member of the Privy Council, it's even more important than their original posts. So I think there are 3 keywords for them. They're low profile, they're efficient, and they're very secret. So in such simple conditions, emperor and the council members take very important responsibilities to handle national affairs. Now let's keep walking. Usually when visitors tour around this area, they will directly pass this Privy Council and go directly towards the Celestial Purity Gate. There was one small gate called Neiyou Gate. It's very small, but it's significant in Qing Dynasty because for the officials to enter the internal palace, it's a very essential gate. Like we said, the council members will have to report to the emperor in the Hall of Mental Cultivation. They have to pass through the gate. Speaking of the members of the Privy Council, there are big names like He Shen. And in Qing Dynasty, for those officials to go to the study in the south side of the Palace Museum, they also have to pass through the Neiyou Gate. And there are several famous names like Liu Yong and Zhang Tingyu, who was the only awarded official in Qing dynasty to enjoy the special treatment of the ancestral palace, the ancestral temple. Now let's move on. On my left side, there are placed several water tanks. It's commonplace in ancient China, but what their usage is to store water for fire fighting. People call them peaceful tanks because they can guarantee peace and harmony. There are three materials for those tanks: iron, copper, and also the copper with gilding. There are 22 of such water tanks with the copper gilding, and some of those tanks were encarved with characters. Through those characters, we could tell their dynasties. For example, in front of the Taihe Hall, there were the iron tanks made in certain dynasty. Now let's look closer at those gilded tanks. If we move closer, we could see that on the surface of the tanks, we can see the words carved during the Qianlong years. The water tanks with the copper gilding then was made during Qianlong's reign. Now let's move on to Qianqing Gate, also named as the Gate of Celestial Purity. Without the approval of the emperor, no official or relative of the royal family could step to Qianqing Gate, and no females in the royal family could also step outside of this Qianqing Gate. Two copper-gilded lions were standing in front of the gate. Just like the Taihe Gate, in front of the Celestial Purity Gate, there are two gilded lions as well. They are made of copper, and they have very special styles. First of all, their ears are towards the land, and the eyebrows were covering their eyes. One detail is about the characters. It says made in Qianlong years, so it means those two lions were made in the same years as those water tanks. Compared with the other two lions in front of the Taihe Gate, those two lions seem more peaceful. The two lions are protecting the Gate of Celestial Purity. It's a very typical gate for the big halls, because from the outside, the gate looks like a very magnificent palace. And on the east and west sides of the Qianqing Gate, we could see the beautiful walls with pattern. They are very splendid, and in Qing Dynasty, Qianqing Gate has a special function, that is, for the officials to meet the emperor in the morning. In Ming Dynasty, the emperor meet the officials in Taihe Gate, but in Kangshi's reigning years, he believed that Qianqing Gate was closer, so for efficiency, he moved such a meeting hall to the Qianqing Palace. And the Celestial Purity Palace was very close, with a distance of less than 100 meters to this gate. Speaking of all the emperors in Qing Dynasty, then we have to say that from 14 years to 69 years old, the emperor would listen to those officials almost every day without exception. So there was screens, the tables, and the ovens, incense ovens for the study. So during Qing dynasties, people used to believe that such a meeting place was in a very enclosed and magnificent hall, but actually it was taking place in a gate. Hongyuan, look here. From the Gate of Celestial Purity, the banners were in 2 languages. Yes, after Puyi resigned, according to the preferential treatment in Ming Dynasty, Puyi and the other royal families could still live in the internal areas to the north of Tianjin Gate, but as to the south of Tianjin Gate, it was the jurisdiction of the then dynasty. Now, in the internal areas, we could see 2 languages on those inscribed boards. Usually the names of the gates are related with the halls or palaces. For example, after Tianjin Gate, it was the Tianqing Palace. And the word Qian is related to the so-called Qian character in the Book of Changes. Now, this is the internal palace. It's not that broad in size, but we could feel the flavor of daily lives. This is the Palace of Celestial Purity, the first one among the 3 big palaces. It's also the biggest one. First of all, it's about 9 and 5 in terms of width and depth, and the area was about 1,400 square meters. Speaking of the depth and the width, there are some special names for those measurements in ancient China. For example, Jingshen was for the width, and the roof of the palace adopts the most splendid forms in ancient China. There are in total 9 animals on top of the roofs, just 1 less than those animals on top of Taihe Hall. So you could tell the ranking and the importance of this Tianjin Palace. It was established in 1420. Before Yongzhen's time, this palace was for the resting and the affair handling of the emperor. But ever since Yongzhen Emperor, he moved to the Hall of Mental Cultivation for his usage, so the Celestial Purity Palace was abandoned, and then it was re-established and restored. So ever since Yongzhen's time in Qing Dynasty, the Palace of Celestial Purity changed into a place for the emperor to meet the officials or to have some special gala. And speaking of gala, every year the emperor will hold a family gathering here in the Palace of Celestial Purity. In Yongzheng and Qianlong's reigning time, there used to be a very big gathering called Qiansong Gala, which was about gathering all those elderly people in the nation together. And when the emperor died, his body will be put in the Palace of Celestial Purity for the concubines to pay their tribute to. So when visitors come to the Palace of Celestial Purity, they will enter it to admire the boards named Zhengda Guangming. So even though without words, every part and every element of the palace was related with the emperor and the dynasty. In addition to the bedroom, the emperor also requires a study. So there will be a study to be shown. What about the kids' study? So that's called 上书房. We also have 御药房, the drugstore, and also 端宁店. We will take you to all of those halls together. Behind me, those houses were towards the north. That's called 上书 study. The study was for the usage of those princes. They have to get up at the dusk time and study Chinese, the Confucius theories, and practice the other techniques like shooting. So the princes will have to be very moral and capable. But of course, such efforts were leading somewhere. According to Emperor Qianlong, because of such a long time of hard work in the study, it paves the way for his future growth and success. It is notable that the ancient emperors were usually very stringent on the kids' study. During Yongzheng's time, Shangshu study was put in this place so that around the time of his meeting with the officials, he could take some time out to meet his kids and check their homework. On the east side of the study, there was a corner room. It's called 四孔处. It's actually named after Confucius. Several intellectuals used to work here, and it was right next to the study. That's because on the first day of the study of the princes, they have to meet their teacher, including the emperor. On some special days every year, the emperor will come to this room in order to honor the Confucius and the teachers. So the emperor really hopes his princes to study hard, and at the same time, they hope that the Confucianism will help the princes and himself to govern the country. And on the north side, that's the drugstore called 御药房. The doctors for the royal family will examine the body of the emperor in this drugstore. And where I am pointing at, above the steps, it's called the Duaning Hall. It's one of the few halls in the Imperial Palace. That's because it's directly related with the lives of the emperor. It's like the wardrobes for the emperor. For example, it's where we store the dragon robe and the belts and boots for the emperors. Now let's look closer. Speaking of the dining hall, on June the 6th every year, there was a custom of putting the clothes outside and bathe them in the sun. I see a red-colored gate below the steps. From this angle, we could see a hidden red-colored store. In feudal China, this used to be the passage for the service people in the Palace Museum. It's called the Tiger's Hole. Some stories were about this hall. In Ming Dynasty, the emperor used to play hide and seek with the service people. For example, with the eunuch, and the emperor used to hide in this red gate. The emperor usually wears something that's very fragrant, a fragrant bag, and the eunuch will find the emperor by smelling the fragrance. Compared with the Hall of Supreme Harmony, Chengqing Palace has a lot of collections. A big stone foundation. Speaking of the stone foundation, in the palace there are in total 4 such stone foundations. And those foundations were made of white marbles. In Ming and Qing dynasties, they're used for carrying the lamps. It's a very essential activity to place all of those lamps, which symbolizes long living. For example, this one. Every year, in the lunar month, December 24th, the lamps will be placed out, and it's carved very beautifully. First of all, such a stone foundation was a hexagon shape, and there were a lot of lions. We could see that it's very elegantly carved. And on top of the foundation, there are some other engravings. If you have interest, you could go to Zhengda Guangming to compare all of those engravings, and usually they are engraved with lions. In the middle, it's a copper-made barrel, and it's very deep. Speaking of the lamp foundation, now let's look at the long-living lamp foundation. There are some very special collections. Behind me, it's another copper-gilded collection. It's called Jiangshan Hall, and on the opposite side of it, it's called Sheji Hall. Putting them together, the words mean the nation. It's less than 10 square meters, but it's made very delicately. So it could be said as the smallest architecture in Palace Museum. There will be incenses light out in this small palace. The incense will be kept burning, and for Jiangshan and Sheji palaces to be placed in front of his bedroom, it means that he hopes for the peace of the nation, and it also symbolizes that he never forgets about the nation in his heart. Now let's look at two other lamps foundation. You just talked about Jiangshan Palace as the smallest palace. You use the word architecture, but I have to correct you, it's the smallest palace, not architecture. Now, those are two other stone foundations to place the wanshou lamps. On the eve of the Spring Festival every year, people will put the wanshou, the so-called long-living lamps, on the foundations. They are not engraved that complicated as the heavenly lamps foundations. I remember there were 4 such big gatherings here held, and in the 50th year of Qianlong's reigning, such a gathering was grand. There were 800 tables according to the recording. The passages and around the halls, tables were placed everywhere with people gathered. So have you heard about the oldest person joining this gathering? Yes, I heard about him. His name was Deng Zhongyue. He was 105 years old when he joined this gathering. And he come afar from Fujian province for this gathering. For such a long-living elderly person come so far from Fujian to the Imperial Palace, that was truly a symbol of the healthy development of the Chinese common people. There are some regular collections here. For example, the sundial representing the time, and also the incense burner. The incense burner sometimes are gilded with copper. Now let's move inside. From here, we could see clearly the displays inside the palace. The seat of the emperor. On two sides of the seat, there are a set of animals. It's a recorded animal in ancient China. According to the story, it usually comes when there is a righteous emperor. Another display was a table, and there are cranes, a couple of cranes, and in front of the seat, there are 4 incense burners. One special thing about it was that in December every year in Qing Dynasty, there was a ceremony. In the ceremony, Kangxi Emperor will pass a special pen to the other generations to write the word good fortune. And the first of such word, fu, meaning good fortune, must be hand here, just below the board. As you know, the board written with the Chinese words meaning upright and open-minded. Shunzhi Emperor writes the first Zhengda Guangming, and he hoped that his descendants will all be upright and open-minded. And then Emperor Kangxi put the 4 Chinese characters in the stones in the hope that such a spirit will be passed on forever. And after the Tianjin Palace was refurbished, those 4 words, Zhengda Guangming, was rewritten by Qianlong Emperor. And one secret was about a secret organization in Yongzhen's years. After he took office, to avoid his brothers to fight with him for the reigning power, he had another system in place, that is, the name of the yet crown prince will be written in one book, and then it will be placed in a box. And the box was placed just behind the board of Zhengda Guangming. After the officials review the box, then the emperor will try to announce the name in the box to avoid any fighting between the sons, the princesses. So 4 emperors are related with this board. Shunzhi wrote the first one, and Kangxi Emperor put the 4 words in the stone, and Qianlong rewrote the 4 words, and then Yongzheng Emperor built a special system of the box. So actually the 4 characters benefit the descendants from then on, with 4 emperors involved. Qianlong, Jiaqing, Daoguang, and Xianfeng emperors afterwards had some relevance to this black box. So one such board of Zhengda Guangming influenced the history of the Qing dynasty. Now let's look at the other 2 palaces. The weather is good for the visiting. It's not as hot as we imagine in summer. There is no sunburning today. We could feel the breeze, the cross ventilation in the passage. Now we are in front of Jiao Tai Hall. It's quite similar to the Hall of Central Harmony. Let's compare the 2. Both of them are in between 2 big halls. They're in the middle. It's called Jiaotai Hall. And Zhonghe Hall was also in between the Hall of Supreme Harmony and the Hall of Perfect Harmony. They have similar patterns and styles from the outside, but one difference was that the Hall of Central Harmony had several stone steps, and there were some stone poles surrounding it. We can only see the inside when they have climbed up the steps. For Jiaotai Palace, Jiaotai means Tai in the Book of Changes. As we know, Qian was in the below and Kun was in the above. We highlight the combination of yin and yang, and the ancient Chinese believe that only with the combination can we have a lot of descendants and harmony. So Jiaotai means our tribute to the heaven and our best wishes to the emperor and empress. Let's look at the carvings. We could see the pattern of phoenix. So Jiaotai Hall was mainly for the usage of the empress for some special festivals. For example, the birthday of the empress is called Qianqiu Festival. For the second day of the beginning of each year, the empress will come here to receive the tribute of the other concubines. That way, she could show her ranking. And also, there will be one festival about agriculture development. And also, there is called a Qingcan Festival, also organized by the empress. She will invite the other concubines to feed the silkworms. If it's you, what kind of tools will you use if you have to feed the silkworms? I will take a bag to carry the leaves, and I will also take a hook to pick those leaves. In feudal China, the empress and the concubines will also take the hooks and a basket. The empress will come to Jiaotai Hall to check the preparation of all of those instruments. Now let's move closer to look at the inside. So from where I'm standing, I could see the inside. In the central of the hall is the seat of the empress. And there are a lot of yellow-colored boxes in square shape. They're called Baolu. Lu means recruitment, added by another part of Chinese character. We call it Baoxia in total. It's mainly used for carrying the emperor's stamp. And now all of those jade seals are already stored in the national museums. According to the record, during Qianlong's years, there used to be 39 such jade seals, and Qianlong recollected all of those jade seals. If there are some overlapping of functionality, he will cancel the seals, and finally he reserved 25 of such jade seals, and 25 was a number related to the Book of Changes. So ancient Chinese will usually believe that all of those odd numbers represent good fortune, and so 25 was one odd number. The emperor also hopes that his dynasty will last long for 25 generations, just like the East Zhou dynasty. Now let's look at the two sides of the seat. I am now pointing at a clock, and on the opposite side, that's a funnel. They're all to record time, just like the sundial. Sundial was placed outdoor to represent the time, and the funnel was placed indoors to record time. we could see that since the water is running at a very steady speed, the water in the funnel can represent time. The clock was introduced to the royal family, and the clock was replacing the funnel to represent time. And then the dynasty could produce the clocks by themselves. This one was placed here to tell all of the royal families about the time. Now let's look at the board above the seat. The Chinese characters were Wu Wei. The two words didn't mean that we will do nothing and just let it go. Instead, it means we will ride along with the trend. Emperor Kangxi wrote the two words. But according to the years written on the board, it's in Qianlong 62 years, which means Qianlong copied the two words in the board. As we know, in the early years of Qianlong's taking office, he said that he will not stay here longer than his grandfathers. That's because when Kangxi was in the reign, he passed away in his 69 years old. But for Qianlong, it's different. He took office when he was 25 years old. So if he could stay in that place for over 60 years, he will have to live to over 80 years old. So when he took office, he announced that he will pass this seat to his son Jia Qing. But he will still try to handle some daily affairs of the palace. And the year of Qianlong was still used in the palace, but outside the palace, Jia Qing's name was used when we record the time. When there is harmony of the heaven and the land, we could see that spirit in the ornations of the Jiaotai Hall. Now let's move on. On the east and west sides of the Hall of Union and Peace, Jiaotai Hall, we could see some beautiful ornations. For example, the glazed bricks, like this brick. It's written Jia Qing 30 year, and it's in the it's in Man and the Chinese languages, both. The board of Wu Wei was written in Jia Qing's years, and the clock was also in the third year of Jia Qing's reigning. So those objects were made in the similar years. It's not coincidence. In the second year of Jia Qing's reigning, one eunuch was burning the oven, and he put the oven in the passage. He never imagined that the oven was lighted, and the changing palace was put on a fire. So the officials made an effort to control the fire, and the other palaces were not impaired by the fire. But for the Changing Palace and the Jiaotai Palace, they have been burned. So that made Qianlong determined to rebuild this hall. Now let's try to visit the last palace. We are seeing one small stone foundation. Tell me about it. I know that it's for the pole. So in the pole there will be some grinded rice. And those rice were put here to feed the crows. The next stop was the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. In Chinese, they pronounced Kunning Palace. Kunning Palace occurred in many novels and TV series. It was established in 1420 in Ming and Qing dynasties. Kunning Palace was for the bedroom of the empress, but during the Shunzhi's reign, he announced that Kunning Palace must be refurbished. So from the outside and the inside, and the functionality, Kunning Palace was reformed. Surrounding the axis, Kunning Palace became the most typical palace of the Manchu nationality. It's totally different from the other palaces. For example, the other palaces usually stand in the central of the axis, but Kunning Palace was a little bit to the east side of the axis, and the doors were smaller. That's because Manchu used to live in northeastern China before coming to the plain area. Such smaller doors will be better for windproof, and the windows are special. The patterns of the window could be compared with the windows of the Jiaotai Hall. We could see that the Kunning Hall's windows have different patterns. The iron hooks were installed in the window. Such a window would be more windproof, and it will let the light in. Those are typical of the Manchu. That's about the outside. Now let's move inside. This one was very big. There is no wall inside to divide it into several smaller rooms. This room used to be used for sacrifices, particularly for Saman religion. And on the three sides of this room, there were several beds. It's also typical of northeastern China. It's called Kang. And that's the only one emperor's seat that is sitting in the south and facing the north. You could see this special direction. As I said, it's for sacrifices in the room, and there are different sacrificing activities. There was a morning sacrifice, and the spirit tablets will be placed on the east side, like the Guan Shi Yin, the goddess of mercy, and the other spirit tablets, like the Mongolian spirits, will be placed in the north. Like those two dolls we are seeing are Mongolians. They are related to Manchu. In addition, in springtime and autumn time, there will be some sacrifices. In Li Gan sacrifice, in front of Kunning Palace, there will be a pole placed on that stone foundation we saw just now. There will be some grinded meat and rice in the pole to feed the crows, because Manchu people believe in the crows. In addition, people will place the living pig as the oblation. There are 3 big ovens here. One of them was used for burning the meat. The other was for the nuts cake. In Qing Dynasty, the emperor will invite all the officials and relatives to eat meat. And for those officials and relatives to be invited here to eat meat in this room, it's a special honor. But as we know, the meat was not tasting good because it's burned with just water with no other flavor. So many officials will hide salt in their sleeves, and they will secretly put the salt on top of the meat to taste better. According to Zheng Guofan, in Qing Dynasty, the emperor may have thought about this flavor, so gradually the emperor will grant the milk tea and other appetizers to the officials. So that's about the west side warm room for sacrifices, but on the east side, the warm room was decorated with a lot of colors. The east warm room was used for the wedding of the emperor. Kangxi Tongzhi and Guangxi emperors used to have their wedding held in the east warm room. Puyi emperor also had his wedding night here. So we must have accuracy here. Puyi retired. He was not an emperor when he held this ceremony here, so it's for wedding night but not wedding ceremony. Now let's look inside. We could see the Chinese character Xi, and there are a lot of dragon and phoenix decorations. There is a big bed, and the carpet, the screen, the lamps, and the red curtain, and the beddings. They all have the elements of dragon and phoenixes and the Chinese character Xi. The ceiling, the walls will have some decorations in black and white. There will be some black-colored paper cutting in the white wall. That's because Manchu used to admire white color because to them, white means brightness and good fortune. So Manchu will use some white-colored couplets in Spring Festival, but gradually Manchu integrate Han culture, so the couplet turned red. Speaking of the warm room, 暖阁, let's talk about how to get warm in winter here in the palace. Xiaoqing, how do you get warm in winter time? If I go outside, I will take some special devices like the hot pack. But in ancient China, there were other manners, like the warm oven. They will hold the oven in their hands, and in the warm room on the east side, we could see the fire basket, like this one. In northeastern China, in modern times, they have the heating system below the floor. And in ancient China, there will be similar installments. There will be a pit. In the pit, they will burn the fires, and the smoke will get outside from some special passages, like the vent. That picture was about the pit, but now they are already closed with the bricks. You could never imagine that this pit used to be for warming up. This is another wooden gate with the Chinese character Xi. When the emperor and empress had their wedding night, they enter the room through this gate. We could see similar patterns and decorations like the warm room. Now let's move on. This is the back of the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. There is one big chimney. You may think it's related to the heating system, but actually is connected with the cooking bench we saw in the Palace Museum. In the Ningshou Palace, there was a similar of such chimney, but the difference is in Ningshou Palace there were two chimneys like this, but there is only one here in Kunming Palace. If you have interest, you could come to discover. For Ningshou and Kunming Palaces, they are both the Manchu architecture. I hear the music for closing the Palace Museum because it's approaching 5 o'clock. The staff will have some clearing activities after closing the door of the Palace Museum. Now this is the Royal Garden. We are seeing a lot of trees. You must be familiar with this garden. It's sitting on the axis. In Ming and Qing dynasties, the emperor, empress, and concubines enjoy their time here in the garden. From where we're standing, you may be thinking that the Imperial Garden doesn't seem that large, but I have to say it's the biggest garden in the Palace Museum. It's about 12,000 square meters. It looks small, that's because it's filled with a lot of decorations and objects, but they're not disorderly. They're placed on the two opposite sides of the axis, in the east and in the west. Now let's take you there. This tree is named Qiu tree. The flower is in purple color. It's very beautiful. And the meaning of it is long life. There are over 100 of such ancient trees in the Royal Garden, but most of those ancient trees were pines and cypresses. There were so many trees so that the emperor will see the color of green when he steps into the garden. On the two sides of the road, there are some very unique stones. Now let's look at those stones. For example, on my right-hand side, this stone looks grotesque. It seems to be made of the tripans piling together. And behind that stone, one other stone was called a qing brick. It's hollow in the middle. It's called a qing brick. That's because the stone will make a sound just like the musical instrument. And it shoulders the functionality as a table. There are two other special stones. First of all, this stone has some natural patterns. On the left of the stone, the pattern seems like an elderly person was bowing to the others. And on the right side of the stone, there seems to be the pattern of the different stars. So putting them together is like an elderly person was trying to pay tribute to the heaven with those 7 stars. Behind that stone, another queer stone was called Yingpen. It's cast landform, and the high part of the stone was like a fall. And the grooves of the stone used to carry a lot of water to keep the fish for the emperor. There are also some spirit animals in the royal garden. People mistook them as the killings, but it's actually called 戒指. If you search it in the search engine, you will know it. It's also one special animal in feudal China. It represents righteousness. So it will help the righteous people to ask for justice. For the head of Xiezhi, it has one such horn. And the 4 feet differ from those of Killing. It's very sharp for Xiezhi, but for Qilin, it's more round. That's the biggest difference between the two animals. Xiezhi looks more beastly. Qilin is for good fortune, and for Xiezhi, we take it as a spirited animal. Tianyi Gate has the meaning of controlling the fire with water. And after that, we come to the major architecture of the Imperial Garden, Qing'an Hall. We are now standing in the northmost part of the Palace Museum. It represents water. As the name Qing'an implies. Behind me is the Hall of Imperial Palace, Qing'an Hall. Around the axis, it's the only architecture purely for religion. It's for Taoism activities. It shows that how the emperor was valuing the mainland China's culture. The emperor hopes that the fire will be controlled with all of those different spirits placed here. And I have to say that the whole of the Imperial Garden has never been put on fire. It has never been refurbished on a large scale. In Ming Dynasty, Mingzong used to live in this hall, interestingly. After the hall of the Imperial Garden, Qing'an Hall, let's look at the other details. After crossing the Tianyi Gate, we see the 2 trees crossing together called twined trunks. We have a Chinese poem about it. Many couples will take a photo in front of the trunks. The twined trunks. If you stand here, you will discover that one of the trunk looks like a monkey. It's here. We could clearly see the face, the mouth, and the ears of the monkey. So it seems like the monkey was leaning against the trunk. On the stones, there are 6 dragons. It's also rarely seen. It also represents the meaning of Tianyi brings water. Another stone step was on the southwest side. According to historical record, it's used for placing the flagpoles. The flagpole was over 30 meters high. So if you stand from distance, you could still have a sight of the flagpole. And on this stone foundation, there are beautiful carvings. They are all related with water. For example, the waves, the sea waves. On 4 corners of the stone foundation, there are crabs, shrimps, and even monsters living in the water. They all echo the theme of water. So for the whole of Imperial Garden, one key word is water. And from ancient China till today, people have always valued the concept of fireproof and security. We saw water tanks called Taiping tank. We also have firewalls. There are many practical installations to protect people against fire. And the Qing'an Hall is as a religious belief in fireproof. The Palace Museum has always valued firefighting and security. In the 1970s, Palace Museum had special firefighting team stationed here. We also have announcements. And during the COVID-19 time, we had a lot of rehearsals of firefighting to guarantee the security of the Palace Museum. Now let's visit the other architectures. Now let's walk outside from the smaller gate. The smaller gate was not here since the beginning. In the 14th year of Zhengda Emperor, the Imperial Garden was reformed, and then the smaller gate was put here. Behind me, that architecture was called Yanhui Pavilion. It's two-storied. The Qing dynasty's emperors like Qianlong Emperor loved here because in the second story he could have a good view, particularly Qianlong Emperor. He used to leave behind him a lot of beautiful poems. One of them say, "We could see the beautiful clouds in the north, and in the south we could see the pines," which means standing on the second story, he could see the beautiful mountain called Jing Mountain, and he could also view the greenish in the Imperial Garden. Among all the Imperial Gardens, one very important architecture was pavilion, particularly in the Ming and Qing dynasties. We have diverse sorts of pavilions. There are 12 pavilions in total in the Imperial Garden, mostly are on the two opposite sides of the axis, in the east and in the west. And they have very elegant names. For example, where I am pointing at is Chenrui Pavilion, and in front of them there is one square-shaped pavilion called Qianqiu Pavilion, and two other pavilions are named Wanchun and Fubi. Those four pavilions represent the four seasons. Wanshou and Qianqiu pavilions, as the name implies, they mean spring and autumn. What about Chenrui? Which season does it represent? Take a guess. Chenrui means the fortunate snow, so it represents winter. For Fubi, it represents summer. Yanhui Pavilion has another story, that is, in Qing dynasties, every year there will be a selection of the service girls in the royal family. This is another pavilion. Your name is Ting, the same pronunciation with pavilion. It's called Sishensi. Sishensi used to be used for Taoism spirits. Feng Huo Yun Lei. People also say, therefore, Qinglong Baihu Zhu Que Xuanwu spirits. I know a lot of culture goers will come here to find this Sishensi. It's easy to be neglected, but why are they here especially for it? Because there was one story. The first Nobel laureate in Asia, Tagore, used to be invited by Puyi, and the two people took such a precious photo in front of Sishensi. Now let's take another photo just like those two. If I am Tagore and you are Puyi, so you will be standing one step above me. In this way, Puyi will be higher than Tagore. It's very interesting. Next time you visit the Palace Museum, you could come here and follow the steps of those big names like Tagore. In addition to the pavilions, the ancient trees in the Imperial Garden, one other highlight in the garden was the beautiful pictures on the floor. There are in total over 900 of such pictures. They are made of bricks and the soft stones. They are in different themes, and their makings are diverse. For example, some of them are about flowers and bugs, some of them are about the historical stories. First of all, now let's look at this one. It's about a pedestrian. Here, this is a person riding on a horse, which means the means of transportation changes along with the time. And next to the horse riding person, this one, this is a human cart. So the times rolled on with different means of transportation. Here, this one, it's bicycle. It's vivid, very modern. Along with the history, let's see the changes. Those are some pavilions and architecture in the Western style. Here, this is the railroad. Let's find the head of the train. This is the head of the train. The train is used for carrying goods. That's exactly what history tells us. So in the open air, we could find those pictures made by the stones. And inevitably, those pictures will be undermined by the footprints of the visitors. We do hope that when the visitors come here, please try to protect those pictures when you step on them. The road is very narrow. Now let's move this way. Xiaoting, the Palace Museum used to be the place of living for Ming and Qing dynasty, and the emperor called them the representation of dragons. So a lot of decorations will be about dragons, like the color painting in the roof and the stone carvings. In addition, Xiaoting, some plants are related with dragon. That I never heard of. Now let's look at them. We could see some green plantations around the rockery. If you download Baidu app, you could use the camera to shoot a picture of those plantations. So, even when the tree is not flowering, if you scan with the camera, you could know exactly what will be the flower called. Here, by scanning this tree, we know that the flower of the tree is named the Chinese trumpet creeper. In Song Dynasty, one poem was about the Chinese trumpet creeper. According to the poems, the trumpet creeper will climb up like a dragon, and the flowers also have the shape of the dragon. People call them the five-pawed dragon because they seem to have 5 paws. So, beyond our imagination, we could find the element of dragon in the plantations. On my right side, this architecture seems like all in Chinese character because it's hollow in the middle. Pu Yi used to learn English here, and then he gave this architecture to his teacher as a study, and he used to take a photo on the second store as well. Here we are seeing 2 locust trees. The locust tree also have the shape of the dragon feet. That open air was called 鹿囿. So it used to be the place for keeping the deers. There was a place to appreciate the deers. Lu in Chinese pronunciation pronounces the same as good fortune and revenue. So together with the peach, which represents long life, they mean good fortune. In the Imperial Garden, we have flowers, the stones, architecture, and different plantations and animals. So that's what the ancient emperors really appreciate. This Imperial Garden is truly a miniature of all the Imperial Gardens. Now we come back to the Kunming Garden and its closing. Our viewers could also appreciate what the Palace Museum looks like when it's closing. Now we are seeing the Kunming Gate board. There are some historical stories about it. In the early years of Ming Dynasty, this Imperial Garden was called Gonghou Garden because it's connected with the three palaces. And this gate was in the northmost part of the Imperial Garden. In the 14th year of Jia Qing's reign, Gonghou Yuan was reformed, and the gate was placed here. So we came out from the west door of Qing'an Hall, and the reform of that small door was taking place in the same years. In the Imperial Garden, we call different pavilions and architectures named after Zhai and Xuan in Chinese. So one tip was that in the Palace Museum there are three types of halls and palaces. Like I said, one type is hall. Usually, for those named halls, they are used for ceremonies, like the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The other type was named with Gong, which means palace, like the Palace of Celestial Purity and the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. Those palaces were for daily lives. And the third category was named Zhai, Xuan, Ge, or Tang. They are carrying the functionality of entertainment for the emperor. The emperor could come to those pavilions to write some words, to practice calligraphy, or to appreciate the different entertainment, like the opera. Now let's look at the east side architecture. Even though you don't know the functionalities of those different architecture, we could tell from their names. In front of us, there is one other architecture. It's called Jiangxue Xuan. It sounds beautiful. From the look of it, it's very special. Compared with Yangxing Zhai, it's complementary. Yangxing Zhai was in the shape of a hollow middle architecture, but Jiangxue Xuan is different. There are different color paintings in it, and the middle was protruding. In front of the architecture, there used to be planted a lot of begonia. When they blossom, they turn white like the snow. That's why this pavilion is called Jiangxue Xuan, with the snow in it. But of course, begonia is not here right now. Instead, the so-called peace flower is planted here. According to the records, this flower could be traced back to Sichuan area. during Qianlong's reign, they introduced this flower to the Imperial Garden. It's very beautiful and it smells good.
那其实在这个降雪轩前面还有另外一块造型非常奇特的奇石。
In front of Jiangxuan, a set of stones were in the middle.
那在介绍之前呢，很多人如果看到这块
Before we introduce
很容易把它
the stone,
误认为是一块木头。
people tend to
其实
mistake
它也是
it
有历史记载的。
as wood.
最开始
But
这个
according
化
to
石
the
呢
records,
它
in the
是一块
beginning,
松树的树干。
the fossils used to be the trunk of pines. In Heilongjiang area, the trunk turned to a fossil. It became a stone, and Heilongjiang took it and gave it to Emperor Qianlong. Since the stone came from the original place of Manchu, Qianlong really loved it, and he gave a poem to honor this trunk. We could still clearly see the poem written by Qianlong. It's understandable. The first two sentences mean that for 10 years' time, the tree turned from a trunk to a fossil. The second sentence means that even though it's a stone, and it sounds like a stone, the patterns and the surface of it still look like wood. So the stone is really something to appreciate, and the emperor really loved the stone. Another pavilion was for us to enjoy. It's called Jing Pavilion. By the name of it, this pavilion was developed around the wells. In the top of the roof, it's empty. Why? It's a special design so that the garbages in the wells could be easily cleared and collected. It's worth mentioning that the water for the royal families was fetched from this well, and the water in the well was from the Yuquan mountain. We are now seeing Wanshou Pavilion. It's the same as the opposite one. On the four sides of this pavilion, there is one of such tree. Like we said, there are a lot of ancient trees in the Imperial Garden, particularly the cypresses. The cypress is divided into two parts. It looks like the Chinese character person, ren, so we call it the ren-shaped cypress. Among the four cypresses, the one sitting on the north was most special. The trees have been surrounded. Some have fixation arrangement. That way of protecting ancient tree also come from Song Dynasty, according to the record. We call it caging the tree. We also want to encourage our visitors to protect the ancient trees when they tour here. Now this is the ren-shaped cypress in the north. It's very thick, but it withered a long time ago. And now this cypress is surrounded by the purple cirrus. This is Fubi Pavilion representing summer. And after crossing by the pavilion, another architecture called Chizao Tang. Chizao means laying out the splendid Chinese characters. It represents the transmission of our culture. And below the board, there is another board called the Palace Museum bookstore. We collect the forewords from Qianlong's writing to make this board for the bookstore. So this is a place highly linked with Qianlong.
那么吃早堂它原来这座建筑是做什么用的呢？
Originally, what's the functionality of Chizaotang? In the 44th year of Qianlong's reign, this place used to be for the storage of the four books. There were in total 11,000 of such books in the different series, called the Siku Quanshu. It's a complete library, and you could see they are classified. They are very big in size. They represent 1/3 of the entire Siku Quanshu. Chizaotang was not just for storage of books, it's also the study room for the emperor. It's inside, and it's very private. There is one couplet on the door. Now let me read it for you. The spring and autumn time allows us to have a good time together. This is the mood of the emperor when he reads. We see that on the left of those characters, there are some seals. They are all from Qianlong Emperor. The first of the seal was Qianlong Chen Han, which means Emperor Qianlong himself gave those words. The second seal writes 吟咏春风里, means we are reading and reciting in the spring wind. It's not easy to discover the words in the seals. Those seals was the expression of Emperor Qianlong when he reads. And also it shows that Emperor Qianlong governs the country with Confucianism and Taoism. Since the study room was very narrow, we will not enter. It's very simple, with just a bench and the special decorations on the window. Such a pattern, called the ice cracking pattern, was commonly seen for the gardens, and there are some poems. It's also written by Emperor Qianlong. The two words Su Feng means he has read a lot, and he could finally see phoenix and find the righteous way of mankind. At that time, he wrote, Qianlong was already in his 70s, but he still reads. Such a spirit of reading and studying was really something to learn from. The bookstore has a lot of cultural histories. Whether as the bookstore of the emperor or the study room of the emperor, this is truly a cultural place.
那在这个吃澡堂的西面，我们就可以看到御花园里的最高峰了，叫做堆秀山。
On the west of Chizaotang is the highest mountain, called Duixiu Mountain. It's 10 meters high, and on top of it there is one pavilion called Yujing Pavilion.
都有这个传统的登高习俗。这个时候，皇帝皇后啊就会一起登高到御景亭里来赏景。
Every year during the Double Ninth Festival, according to Chinese tradition, we climb the mountains. So was the same for the emperor and the empress. For Tehu stones, we could feel the exact characteristics of those stones in this mountain. For example, some of the stones were in the particular shape, like the rectangle shape. And another characteristic of the stones on the mountain was that the pattern on the stone usually have some wrinkles on it. And the third characteristic was the holes on the stones. The light and the sunshine could pass through the stones, through the holes. And all of the three characteristics echoed the fourth one, that is the elegance of the mountain, stone mountain. On the west and east side of the stone mountain, there are the artificial spring, and on the bottom of it, there are some lion engravings. So those elegantly engraved lions on the fountain and the dragon head was for the water to come out. Do you know how to trigger the water? It's in the halfway of the stone mountain. There was a water tank. The water tank is connected with this one, and with the pressure of the water, it will come out from the dragon head. On the east side, there is one secret place. There are two words on top of the stone. 云根. Qianlong wrote it here. According to the saying, when the cloud touches the stone, it takes roots there. For the stones on Duixiu Mountain, they're very grotesque. If you have a lot of imaginations, some of the stones look like animals. For example, there, one stone was protruding, and the tip of the stone looks like the tip of the animal nose, and we're seeing some holes in the stone, so that's like the nostril of the animals. By that, the entire stone looks like the pig head. And the pig head seems very large. Let's look at the opposite side. What other animals are forming on the stones? Maybe we have different imagination results. It's just for your reference. You could come for yourself to discover the animals in the stones. I know one stone. It looks very much like an animal. You will know it the moment you see it. Take a guess. It's obvious. It looks like a chicken looking back. The body and the tail, they all look like the chicken. There is one black stone against the red wall. If you imagine the semicircle as the ears of an animal and the protruding stone was the nose, then this stone looks like a dog, at least to me. Exactly. So those are the animals we want to introduce to you from the look of the stones. If you have interest, please come and discover by yourself. Now we're walking outside Shunzhen Gate. That's the north gate of the Imperial Garden. And now this is Shenwu Gate, the north gate of the Palace Museum. The empress used to hunt in Zhengda, and he may also visit the summer palace. When he came back, he will have to cross the Shenwu Gate, the gate of divine prowess. For the other concubines, They pass through the Shenwu Gate. And Shenwu Gate is another highlight for visitors. And we are approaching the end of this live broadcasting. Before the end of it, we want to give our thanks. We would love to firstly thank our viewers for watching this video. Without you here, our live broadcast will be meaningless. Then, I want to thank the media friends and the technicians behind the live show. Thank you for your support. Without your efforts and contributions, we cannot display the Palace Museum entirely to our visitors and viewers. To share with you one story, the previous series of our live broadcasts, for example, the anchors, they have supported us for this live broadcast, whether technically or the content support. In the future, we will continue the efforts and learn from our past experience to bring our viewers more live broadcasts. Please stay tuned. And this is the end of this live show. Thank you for watching.